Good evening, friends. Before I begin today's analysis, I remember the Canterbury Tale, a work by the 14th century English writer Geoffrey Chaucer. In Canterbury Tales, a host of pilgrims visit Canterbury on a pilgrimage every year. Friends, they sought out for a purpose. They set out for a purpose, and their only destination was the pilgrimage at Canterbury. Friends, the understanding of the society is a kind of pilgrimage which we have embarked upon. So, my dear friends, I welcome you all to the Businessline and the Hindu editorial analysis on June 3rd, 2022. Let us discuss the topics one by one. Friends, today I am going to take up the editorials from the Businessline first. The first editorial which I am going to discuss is about a disinvestment spree of the central government. The title of the editorial is Reimagining Disinvestment. Friends, we have seen the recent disinvestments have not seen much success with the investors. The 52% stake in Bharat Petroleum could not be taken off. The Pawan Sangh hands disinvestment could not be taken off. The LIC disinvestment resulted in a greater disadvantage. The Central Electronics disinvestment, the BEML, the IDBI, the Shipping Corporation of India all have tasted failure. Why the government is on a spree to disinvest most of the PSUs? The motive is to bridge the fiscal deficit. To bridge the fiscal deficit, disinvestment, the government thinks, is the only way out. The editorial points out that fiscal deficit, which is the excess of expenditure, public expenditure of over public revenue, cannot be only filled up with the money accruing from the disinvestment process. Government thinks that it has no business to be in the business sector. It is trying to privatize most of the strategic sectors of the economy. The editorial points out that this is not the way. Why not a greater management, a professional management, and a management with a dexterity and efficiency be put into this management of PSUs so that we can reap the profitability and rich dividends from the PSUs rather than disinvesting. The investors are very much skeptic about the global energy market. That is why the Bharat Petroleum disinvestment was not a success. Investors are also wary of the trade union disturbance from the PSUs, the strong trade union disturbance from the PSUs. That is another reason why most of the disinvestment process of PSUs could not take off. The editorial says that this is not giving any kind of encouragement. The government doesn't have a long-term goal. It only tries to fill up the fiscal deficit, which is a very short-term goal. The government has a policy of 2021 to come out of most of the strategic sectors in business and leave it to the private parties. And the editorial points out that the private parties are not much interested in taking over PSUs. The government must try some other way out to find money for the long term process. So, the conclusion of the editorial is that privatization is fine. Whether you have tried out better management of these PSUs so that look at the profitability, improving the profitability of the PSUs rather than disinvesting it. Why not look at the profitability of the PSUs being better managed? Fill the PSUs with better management so that that profitability will have long-term repercussions in the economy. So that will definitely fill the present gaps in the fiscal deficit. Friends, the next article which I am going to discuss is capital intensity and household sector. In this article, the writer analyzes the capital intensity of various sectors forming within the household sector. The capital intensity means the amount of capital investment in machinery, plant and machinery in a sector of the economy as comparison to the human capital involved in producing goods and services in the sector. More capital intensity means the sector is running on a huge investment in plant and machinery. The writer analyzes the capital intensity of various household sectors. In overall economy, the capital intensity has come down from 0.6 percentage to 0.5 percentage over a period of 10 years. The capital intensity of mining construction has increased a lot. That is, per unit output of capital investment has improved a lot. That means in construction and mining sector, not much employment can be generated. Whereas the informal sectors out of the household sectors are having a declining capital intensity ratio. What does that mean? The employability factor, the generation of employment factor in informal sectors like services are very much higher. So, focusing on the informal sectors of the economy would be the key. The writer goes on to point that some graphs are also given showing the capital intensity of the economy, overall economy, in comparison to the capital intensity of the household. Friends, what is this household sector? Household sector is the sector that caters to the needs of the construction and manufacturing sector. The household sector invests factors of production and consumes the goods and services produced by the manufacturing industry and construction industry. In this article, it says that informal household sector, that is the sector of small scale service providers and the industries, during the pandemic and demonetization period have helped themselves. They had fallen into non-performing assets for the banks which provided capital to them. They could surpass this difficulty by financing among themselves. Therefore, the output per unit of capital intensity in household informal sector is very less. Why? The informal sector is not capital intensive. The output produced by the informal sector provides goods and services and the factors of production. to the manufacturing and mining sector and construction sector without much use of plant and machinery. Hence, there is employment generation possibility in this informal household sector. How the capital intensity of the mining and manufacturing increased. This is because the investment in capital, plant and machinery substituted the human capital, and digital payments just reduced the use of money and capital to the mining and manufacturing sector. The article goes on to explain the charts with regard to the performance of the overall economy consisting of agricultural, mining, construction, road construction, and manufacturing sector, vis-a-vis the household sector. The article says that the household sector has come out of the shocks of the demonetization and the pandemic and is in poised for a comfortable. Friends, the next article I am going to discuss is about the monetary policy committee's meetings on raising the repo and the reverse repo and CRR rates, which is coming in June. The article is titled Back to Back Increase in Repo Rate Inevitable. What does it mean? The inflation is soaring at a very high pace. The RBI is revising its estimate to place inflation above 6%. The growth of the economy has clocked 8.7% the real GDP. Therefore, the article is saying that the present priority of the Monetary Policy Committee is to rein in inflation. The raising of the repo rates are again necessary and inevitable. The writer expects another rise in the repo rates in the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting. The article touches upon the excise duty cut on petrol and fuels and the scrapping of customs duties on soybean and sunflower oil to make their imports very much friendly. Imposition of export duty on steel manufactured products. These are the measures taken by the government to rein in inflation. The article concludes by saying that further hike in repo rates is the sine qua non for saving the economy from the inflation and to trigger the necessary consumption in the economy. The disposable incomes in the hands of the households is very much less. It can only be raised if the repo rates are increased. For example, the banks will raise the rate of interest on deposits. However, the manufacturing sector has to suffer because the loans will be very much costly. The article also touches upon Indian Meteorological Department's good forecast of monsoons, on which we pin hopes on a very good agricultural year ahead. The next article which I am going to discuss is Only One Earth, Stockholm Revisited. This year, we are going to celebrate the 50 years or the golden jubilee of the Stockholm Conference on Climate Change on Environment 50 years back. It was in 1972 that the Stockholm Conference was held. The article says that after the Second World War, many nations got independent and they formed together a third world nation. And these nations are still the developing nations. The developing nations were in sustenance mode, investing whatever they might to increase the production. They never were bothered about the impact of their production activities and manufacturing activities on the environment. Hence, this was pointed out by Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in the Stockholm Conference in 1972. Srimati Indira Gandhi pointed out that right to life was the priority then. We, as a developing nation, cannot sacrifice our right to life and availability of developmental activities, the production and the goods and services for the sake of filling the gap in growth and feeding the masses. The employment generation was also necessary. In the search of such avenues, we cannot think of environment. Sacrificing the environment by the developing nations was a necessity, is what Srimati Indira Gandhi pointed out in the Stockholm Conference. The idea of the developed nations was that they would produce and manufacture whatever they could, sacrificing the environment. It is only the developing nations which had to bear the brunt of protecting the environment and for helping the developed nations remain as developed nations by producing more and more, sacrificing the environment. This is not true. The third world objected. Hence, considering the cry of the developing nations or the third world, the FAUNEX panel was formed a year before the Stockholm Conference. In 1971, the FAUNEX panel called for a level playing field to the developing nations so that the environmental protection should be taken up not just by the developing nations but by the developed nations in partnership with developing nations. Remembering the Stockholm Conference 50 years since its formation, we are hoping a conference would be held in India very soon. There is something called the Sustainable Development Goals, my dear friends. The article touches upon the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goals is that the goal of every country to adopt the sustainable methods of manufacturing, production, and other various areas of economic activity. An account of the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals would be taken up in this year. The article hopes that the Sustainable Development Goals achievement and the investment on greener aspects of manufacturing will be taken into account in the present year. The article concludes by saying that in 2025, India may host the account to take account of the sustainable development goals being met by countries. My dear friends, now let me take up articles from the Hindu. The first article to be discussed is on the GST collections and the compensation cess being paid to the state. The editorial is titled A Critical Juncture. In the editorial, the editor discusses a rupees 87,000 crores being paid as compensation cess to the states. This has been a very long awaited affair. The central government has finally met the compensation dues for the states. Otherwise, it would have paved the way for another round of compensation cess being extended for the next 5 years. Had the cess not been paid duly in this juncture, it would have meant that the sin goods, that is, kind of cars and all, would have been costlier even for the next 5 years. Now, with the states having this money, they can invest this money for the purpose for which this cess was formed, that is, for the developmental purposes. The article touches upon the the reason why the central government could pay this compensation cess now. This is due to the record GST collections of 1.67 crores in April 2022, which made the central government, which enabled the central government to pay the dues of compensation cess to the states. Friends, a compensation cess has been in existence since the GST came into being, and the compensation cess was aimed at compensating the states who lost the GST revenues in the producing states. So the cess compensation payment has been a statutory liability which has now been met by the central government. However, we must not forget that the 1.87 crores, the GST collections of April, reflects the inflation figure. The inflation figures are just building in the figures of collections of the GST for the month of. The editorial concludes by saying that a reform is necessary in the still young GST structure. Whether in the times of higher inflation, a GST rate restructuring is necessary, or a reorientation to lower inflation is first accomplished, and then the GST rate should be broadened and compliance should be eased. If the compliance is eased, the GST collections will go up high, and it is possible only when a lower inflation is just made. Friends, the next editorial to be discussed is a grim turn. This discusses the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits, because more and more Kashmiri Pandits are being killed in Jammu and Kashmir for no reason. The words describing the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits is they are in a predicament. Predicament means a very difficult and grievous situation. The article uses the word abominable. The word abominable means very heinous and shameful kind of activities on the part of the separatist groups. The separatist groups have got the confidence of the people of Kashmir, showing that the withdrawal of Article 370 was the reason for the all kinds of problems happening in the state now. The arrest of Yasin Malik has helped them to vindicate the point that the problems are all because of this withdrawal of Article 370. How these separatist groups are influencing the people of Kashmir is a very, very wretched kind of thing which we are able to observe now. The gruesome killing of Kashmiri Pandits is a very, very abominable act on the part of the separatists. The separatists are going on discouraging the Kashmiri Pandits, and the Kashmiri Pandits are threatening to leave the valley. In 1990s, we remember that a similar kind of exodus was done by Kashmiri Pandits, and they left the valley to flee to New Delhi. And in the previous government, UPA government, they were given some kind of financial support, initially 7 lakhs and later 15 lakhs, and a job security to make them entrenched in Kashmiri Valley. They listened, and then they returned to the Kashmiri Valley, and for a long time they have been very much peaceful. Till the withdrawal of Article 370, most of the Kashmiri Pandits were terming Jammu Kashmir as their own home, and they were comfortable. And the separatists got hunch of this withdrawal of statehood for Jammu Kashmir to unleash terror on the Kashmiri Pandits, the vulnerable groups in the valley. Now they threaten to leave the valley. The central government must show its magnanimity and leave the belligerence and try to solve this problem by holding peace talks with the separatist activists. As at the end of the editorial, the editor uses the phrase muscular triumphalism. Muscular triumphalism is justifying a stand taken by some group or body for some kind of actions being taken on somebody. So, this is a very questionable thing which is the editorial asks. The muscular triumphalism should be driven away, and efforts should be taken that the Kashmiri Pandits and every section of the population lives in Kashmir peace. Friends, the next article to be discussed is India Pakistan ties and the mirror of 2019. We remember the Balakot strike in 2019. The article touches upon the incident and the hijacking of one aircraft by the Pakistan, and goes on to explain that the belligerence on both sides should be given up. The belligerence means kind of animosity towards the neighbors. It should be given up because in 2020, when the line of actual control was in very much difficult situation and China was exerting pressure on India, the government tried to have peace talks with Pakistan so that Pakistan should not join China. The effort should be made so that a peaceful environment must be maintained. India Indus Water River Treaty was being discussed by India and Pakistan. The article goes on to say that a very much tensionful approach should be given up by both India and Pakistan and reach at a consensus. The article points out the suffering of Kashmir at the hands of separatist forces. There is backing from Pakistan of the separatist forces acting in Kashmir. This article is saying that all this is because of the belligerent attitude of both India and Pakistan. Most of the times, the political will of the government is that to manipulate such kind of Balakot strike kind of incidents for the favor of the elections. This should be not done. This should not be done, and the effort should be truly made to forge a friendship so that the innocent people do not suffer at the hands of terrorists and separatist forces is what the article is all about. Friends, let me conclude for the day. It has been a discussion, a wonderful discussion with you, starting with the Canterbury Tales. And we are on a pilgrimage to know the world and our nation, and we love the nation. The world affairs are very much important to understand the things going on around us, and as we know more and more, our knowledge about the society, our knowledge about our fellow beings and nations increase. This is a balanced approach which is contributed by reading the Hindu and the Businessline articles and any standard newspaper for that instance. Friends, let us make the effort of Canterbury pilgrimage a success through discussion of articles every day, and keeping in mind the society is very much expecting from us. Friends, let me take video for the day. Meet you tomorrow with some more articles. Till then, bye.